My brother's new girlfriend sneered at my worn-out coat during his housewarming, loudly joking I was homeless and likely there to beg for a bed. My father just laughed, telling me to stop being sensitive. Then she bragged about her new boss, not realizing that boss was me. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The exhaustion was a physical weight, heavy and dragging, settling deep into the marrow of my bones. It wasn't the kind of tired you get from a long jog or a bad night's sleep. It was the cumulative, crushing fatigue of a 6-month merger that had finally closed 3 hours ago. I sat in the driver's seat of my 2014 Honda Civic, the engine idling with a familiar, rattling wheeze. The air conditioning had given up the ghost somewhere around mile marker 40 on the highway, and the late afternoon heat was stifling. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel, breathing in the smell of old upholstery and stale coffee. I should have gone home. I should have gone to my actual home, the penthouse apartment downtown with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the climate-controlled wine cellar that I rarely had time to visit. I should have ordered takeout from that sushi place that charges $50 for a roll, drawn a bath hot enough to scald, and slept for 14 hours. But I couldn't. Today was Jard's housewarming party. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text from my father, Thomas. "Everyone is already here. Try not to look like you just rolled out of bed, Vanessa. Jard has important friends coming." I stared at the screen, the backlight stinging my dry eyes. Important friends. The irony was sharp enough to cut, but I just swallowed it down, the same way I had swallowed every slight and dismissal for the last decade. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Thomas wasn't entirely wrong. I looked wrecked. My hair, usually pulled back in a severe, professional bun, was fraying at the edges, strands escaping to stick to my clammy neck. I was wearing a hoodie I'd grabbed from the back seat to cover the fact that my blouse had a coffee stain from a clumsy intern earlier that morning. I had dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, even if I had the energy to apply it. I looked like a mess. I looked like someone who was struggling. And that was exactly how my family preferred to see me. I turned off the ignition, the Honda shuddering into silence. Outside, the house loomed, a sprawling, new construction McMansion in a subdivision that smelled of fresh sod and arrogance. It was a nice house. A very nice house. It was the house Jard had always wanted, and the house my parents had heavily subsidized because Jard needs a stable foundation to start his life. While I had been told at 18 that sinking or swimming was a character-building exercise. I grabbed the gift bag from the passenger seat. Inside was a set of hand-forged Japanese kitchen knives I'd picked up during a business trip to Tokyo last month. They cost more than my car. I had wrapped them in simple brown paper, no flash, no glitter. I stepped out of the car, my sneakers crunching on the pristine gravel of the driveway. A lineup of BMWs, Audis, and one pretentious Tesla filled the space. My dented Civic looked like a pimple on a model's face. I walked to the front door, taking a deep breath to steel myself. I just needed to survive 3 hours. Smile, nod, congratulate Jard, avoid getting into an argument with Dad about my lack of direction, and then I could leave. I rang the doorbell. It swung open almost immediately, but it wasn't Jard standing there. It wasn't my mom or even my dad. It was a woman I had never met, though I had seen her perfectly curated photos on Jard's Instagram. Rachel. She was stunning in a terrifyingly manufactured way. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of blonde extensions, her makeup was contoured to within an inch of its life, and she was wearing a white dress that looked dangerously close to bridal. She held a flute of champagne in one hand, her manicured nails tapping against the glass. She looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my scuffed sneakers, traveled up my faded jeans, paused at the coffee-stained hoodie, and finally landed on my tired face. She didn't smile, she didn't say hello. She turned her head slightly over her shoulder, shouting back into the house, her voice pitched high and mocking. "Jard, babe, I think the cleaning lady is here, but she's really early." She turned back to me, a smirk playing on her lips, her eyes cold and dead. "Deliveries go to the side door, sweetie. We don't want to track mud into the foyer." The betrayal wasn't in her words. I was used to strangers underestimating me. The betrayal was in the laughter I heard erupting from the living room behind her. I heard my father's distinct, booming chuckle. It was worse than the diagnosis of a terminal illness. It was the confirmation that in this family, I was not just the black sheep. I was the joke. "I'm not the cleaning lady," I said, my voice raspy from hours of negotiation earlier that day. I cleared my throat and stood a little straighter, though the fatigue pulled at my shoulders. "I'm Vanessa, Jard's sister." Rachel's eyebrows shot up, an exaggerated pantomime of surprise that didn't reach her eyes. Oh my God." She let out a breathless, fake laugh, placing a hand on her chest. "Jard, it's your sister, the one you told me about." She stepped back, swinging the door wide open, but she didn't move out of the way to let me in. She stood there like a gatekeeper, forcing me to squeeze past her. As I did, I caught the scent of her perfume, something heavy, floral, and expensive. "Wow," she said, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper as she closed the door behind me. "I am so sorry, look at you, I naturally assumed." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at my entire existence. "You just look so hard-pressed." I gripped the handle of the gift bag tighter. "It's been a long week, Rachel." "I bet," she smirked. "Shift work is a killer, isn't it? My cousin works at a diner and she always looks just like you do, just drained." I walked into the foyer, ignoring the jab. The house was impressive, I had to admit. High ceilings, marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost 10 grand. It was loud, filled with the chatter of 20 or 30 people. My parents' friends, Jard's college buddies, neighbors. Jard came bounding out of the kitchen, a beer in his hand. He looked good, healthy, tanned, wearing a crisp polo shirt tucked into chinos. The golden child shining bright. "Ness," he shouted, coming over to give me a one-armed, half-hearted hug. He pulled away quickly, his eyes darting to my hoodie. "You made it. You didn't have time to change." "Came straight from work," I said, forcing a smile. "Happy housewarming, Jard. The place is beautiful." "Yeah, isn't it?" He puffed out his chest, looking around. "We got a great deal. Dad really helped with the down payment negotiation." "I bet he did," I said quietly. "So, this is Rachel," Jard said, wrapping an arm around the woman who had just tried to send me to the service entrance. "Rachel, this is Vanessa." "We met," Rachel said, linking her arm through Jard's and squeezing his bicep. "I almost sent her to the servants' quarters. Can you believe it? But honestly, Jard, you didn't tell me she was struggling this much." My father, Thomas, walked into the hallway then. He was a tall man with silver hair and a posture that demanded authority. He held a glass of scotch, the ice clinking as he walked. "Vanessa," he greeted me with a nod, not a hug. He looked at my outfit with open disdain. "I specifically texted you to dress appropriately. There are people here from the club. It reflects poorly on us when you show up looking like a vagrant." "Nice to see you too, Dad," I said, feeling that familiar, childish lump form in my throat. I held out the gift bag to Jard. "Here, for the kitchen." Jard took the bag. It wasn't heavy, but the contents were substantial. He peeked inside, pulling back the brown paper. He frowned. "Knives." "They're hand-forged Japanese steel," I began to explain. "The artisan is." "Oh, cute," Rachel interrupted, peering into the bag. "Are they second-hand? The wrapping paper looks a bit recycled." "They are not second-hand," I said, my voice hardening. "They are custom." Rachel laughed, a tinkling, condescending sound. "It's okay, Vanessa. We know things are tight. Honestly, it's the thought that counts. We can use them in the garage or something. Jard, put them away before anyone sees the packaging." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks. "Rachel, those knives are worth more than." "Vanessa, stop," my father cut in, his voice sharp. "Don't be defensive. Rachel is just being gracious about your gift. Don't make a scene because you're embarrassed." "I'm not embarrassed," I said, looking from my father to my brother. Jard wouldn't meet my eyes, he was too busy smiling at Rachel. "I'm trying to explain what the gift is." "We get it," Dad said, taking a sip of his scotch. "You did what you could. Now go get yourself a drink and try to blend in, or maybe stay in the kitchen. Just let it go. You're making this awkward." Let it go, the family mantra whenever Vanessa was being mistreated. I watched them turn away. Rachel whispered something in Jard's ear, and he laughed, kissing her temple. Dad clapped Jard on the back, beaming with pride. They walked toward the living room, leaving me standing alone in the foyer with my vagrant clothes and my burning indignation. I took a deep breath, counting tea. 10, I could leave. I could turn around, get back in my Civic, and never speak to them again. But then I remembered the text I had received just before I closed the merger deal today. A notification from HR about the new hires for the quarter. I hadn't looked at the names closely then, but as I watched Rachel sashay into the living room, a realization hit me. A name. A face from a profile picture. Rachel Miller, Junior Account Executive. She had no idea. I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of my phone. A slow, cold calm washed over me, replacing the exhaustion. They wanted to play games about status. They wanted to talk about who was struggling. They had forgotten one crucial thing. The person who signs the checks is the only one who truly holds the power. I walked into the living room, not to blend in, but to watch. To understand why the scene in the foyer hurt so much, you have to understand the history of the golden child and the spare. Jard was the miracle baby. My parents had tried for years to have a son to carry on the family name. My father was obsessed with legacy, even though his own legacy was a mid-sized insurance firm that he had sold for a decent, but not earth-shattering, some 10 years ago. When Jard was born, the sun rose and set on him. He was given everything: private tutors, sports camps, a brand new car at 16, college tuition paid in full, and a hefty allowance well into his 20s. I, on the other hand, was an accident. Born 4 years later, I was the oops baby. I wasn't mistreated in the Dickensian sense. I was fed, clothed, and housed, but I was emotionally invisible. If Jard got an A, it was a celebration. If I got an A, it was expected. If Jard needed help with rent, checkbooks opened. When I needed help with tuition, I was told it would build character to take out loans. So I did. I built a hell of a lot of character. I worked 3 jobs in college. I taught myself to code at night. I started Helix Media from a damp basement apartment when I was 22, eating instant ramen and stealing Wi-Fi from the coffee shop downstairs. For 10 years, I ground my bones to dust. I missed weddings, birthdays, and holidays. I reinvested every single penny back into the company. I drove a beat-up car because I preferred to spend that money on hiring the best developers. I wore simple clothes because I didn't have time to shop, and frankly, I didn't care. My family knew I had a little marketing thing going on. They assumed I was a freelancer, scraping by, designing flyers for local pizzerias. I never corrected them. At first, it was because I wanted to surprise them when I made it big. Later, it was because I realized they didn't care enough to ask. And recently, it was a test. A test they failed every single time we spoke. I stood in the corner of Jard's living room, nursing a glass of warm tap water because the bar was crowded, and watched Rachel work the room. She was a predator in white chiffon. I watched her corner Aunt Marge, asking pointed questions about Marge's vacation home in Florida, clearly calculating its net worth. I watched her flirt aggressively with one of my dad's old business partners, laughing too loud at his terrible jokes while touching his arm. But her primary target was me. She seemed to sense that I was the weak link in the room, the one person she could punch down on to elevate herself. She floated over to where I was standing, dragging Jard with her like a prop. A few of her friends, clones in pastel dresses, flanked her. "So, Vanessa, Rachel said, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of the nearby circle. Jard tells me you're single, still. I'm busy, I said neutrally. Busy with what? She giggled. Looking for a rich husband, because honestly, looking at you, you might want to try a different strategy, maybe show a little more effort. Her friends tittered. Jard looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. He just swirled his drink. I focus on my career, I said, my gaze steady. Right, your career, Rachel said, using air quotes. Freelancing is so brave, I mean, not knowing where your next check is coming from, I would die of anxiety, but I guess you're used to living with less. I manage, I said. Well, you should take notes from me, Rachel said, puffing out her chest. I just landed a massive position, a real career, not just gig work. Oh, I asked, tilting my head. Where at? Helix Media, she announced, beaming. It's the hottest digital agency in the city, maybe in the country. We handle accounts for Fortune 500 companies. The hiring process was brutal, only the elite get in. My heart did a slow, heavy thud in my chest. She had been there for 3 days. Is that so? I asked softly. Oh, absolutely, Rachel continued, her voice rising as she realized she had an audience. My father drifted over, looking pleased that his son had snagged such a success. Full woman. The culture there is incredibly exclusive. High stakes, high reward. My starting salary is probably more than you've made in the last 5 years combined. That sounds impressive, Dad chimed in, clapping a hand on Jard's shoulder. See, Vanessa, that's what ambition looks like. Rachel is going places. You could learn a thing or two. I'm actually practically best friends with the CEO, Rachel lied, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the fabrication. She's this terrifying, powerful woman, but she took a shine to me immediately, said I reminded her of herself when she was younger. We're actually doing lunch next week to discuss my trajectory to management. I almost choked on my water. The CEO, me, had been in Tokyo last week and locked in a boardroom for the last 3 days. I had never laid eyes on Rachel Miller until she opened the door of this house. She sounds discerning, I managed to say. Oh, she is, Rachel nodded seriously. She hates incompetence. She hates people who don't present themselves well. Honestly, Vanessa, if you walked into our office looking like that, security would tackle you before you hit the elevator. She laughed again and her friends joined in. Even Dad cracked a smile. Well, Dad said, at least one woman in this family is making something of herself. Good for you, Rachel. Jard, you picked a winner. Rachel preened, leaning into Jard. I try, Thomas, I really do. Maybe once I'm settled in, I can see if there's an opening in the mailroom for Vanessa. Or maybe janitorial. We always need people to empty the bins. The room went quiet for a split second. It was a step too far, even for them. But then Jard laughed. A nervous, coerced laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. Yeah, Jard said. Maybe you can help her out, babe. I looked at my brother. I looked at my father, who was nodding in agreement. And finally, I looked at Rachel, who was grinning like the cat who had eaten the canary, unaware that she was actually standing inside the lion's den. You know, Rachel, I said, my voice dropping an octave, losing all traces of the raspiness. I would love to hear more about your role at Helix, specifically about this lunch with the CEO. Oh, honey, she sneered, rolling her eyes. You wouldn't understand the corporate lingo. Let's just stick to easy topics for you. How's the Honda running? Still barely. I didn't storm off. Storming off implies a loss of control, and if there was one thing running a multi-million-dollar company had taught me, it was that emotion is a liability in negotiations. And this was a negotiation for my dignity. I need to use the restroom, I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with the chaotic thumping of my heart. Down the hall, second door on the left, Jard muttered, not looking at me. He was too busy refilling Rachel's champagne glass, his posture submissive, like a waiter serving a queen. Don't use the master bath, Rachel called out after me, her voice shrill. I don't want you touching my skincare products, A ripple of laughter followed me down the hallway. I kept walking, my spine rigid, until I reached the guest bathroom. I stepped inside and locked the door, leaning back against the cold wood. The silence was instant and heavy. I looked at myself in the mirror. The exhaustion was still there, the dark circles, the fraying hair, but something had changed in my eyes. The dull resignation was gone, replaced by the sharp, steely glint I usually reserved for hostile takeovers. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I unlocked the screen and navigated to the Helix Media internal directory. It was a secure app, accessible only to employees. I bypassed the standard login with my biometric passkey, the master key. I typed in Miller. One result popped up. Rachel Miller, Junior Account Executive, Sales Department, probationary period. Start date 3 days ago. Direct Supervisor, Marcus Thorne. I tapped on her profile. Her resume was attached to her digital file. I scanned it quickly. It was embellished, to put it politely. She claimed 5 years of experience at a firm I knew had gone bankrupt 3 years ago. She listed advanced negotiation as a skill. But the real kicker was the internal notes left by HR. Note, candidate is enthusiastic but lacks technical experience. Hiring on a trial basis due to referral from redacted. Monitor closely for cultural fit. Cultural fit, I whispered to the empty room. In Helix terms, that was code for don't let them become a toxicity hazard. She had lied about her position. She had lied about her salary. But the lie about the lunch, the claim that she was being groomed for management by me, was the leverage I needed. It wasn't just a personal slight, it was a misrepresentation of company leadership. It was actionable. I didn't stop there. I opened my email and drafted a quick message to Marcus, her supervisor. Marcus was a good man, a no-nonsense manager who had been with me since the garage days. Subject, urgent query Ray, new hire Rachel Miller Marcus, I'm at a family event and just met your new hire, Rachel Miller. She is currently representing herself as a senior executive and claiming she and I have a standing lunch appointment to discuss her promotion. Can you confirm her actual schedule for the week? Also, please stand by. I might need you to hop on a call. I hit send. Then I opened my calendar app. I scrolled back to last week. Tokyo, meetings from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I scrolled to this week, the merger closing. I took a screenshot of my itinerary. I had the trap, I had the bait. Now I just needed her to walk into it. I washed my hands, scrubbing them with the lavender soap until they were pink. I splashed cold water on my face, patting it dry with a plush guest towel. I didn't try to fix my hair. I didn't try to smooth my hoodie. Let them see the struggling sister. It would make the reveal that much more devastating. When I returned to the living room, the dynamic had shifted slightly. The party was in full swing. The music had been turned up, a generic pop playlist that thumped innocuously in the background. Rachel was now holding court on the white leather sofa, shoes off, legs tucked under her, looking every inch the mistress of the manor. My father was sitting in an armchair nearby, looking at her with an expression of reverence he had never once directed at me. Jard was sitting on the arm of the sofa, his hand resting possessively on Rachel's shoulder. They looked like a tableau of the perfect, successful family, and I was the stain on the photograph. I walked over, deliberately stepping into the center of their circle. Back so soon? Rachel quipped, not looking up from her phone. I was worried you got lost in a house this size. It's a lot bigger than whatever you're used to. I found my way, I said, taking a spot standing near the fireplace. I didn't sit. Standing gave me the height advantage, even if they didn't realize it yet. I was actually thinking about what you said, Rachel, about Helix. Rachel's head snapped up, her eyes narrowed. What about it? I'm just so impressed, I said, injecting a tone of genuine curiosity into my voice. It's a tough industry. Marketing requires a lot of integrity. It requires killer instinct, Rachel corrected me with a sneer. Something you clearly lack, that's why I'm on the fast track and you. Right, I nodded. The fast track. You mentioned the CEO took a shine to you. What's she like? I've read a few articles, but they say she's very private. Rachel sipped her champagne, relishing the attention. The entire circle, Dad jarred, the neighbors leaned in. She is private, Rachel said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. But with me, she really opened up. We had this heart-to-heart in her office on Tuesday. She told me she's tired of the yes men surrounding her. She needs someone fresh, someone with vision. She actually asked me for advice on the Kyoto account. The room murmured with appreciation. Wow, Jard said, beaming. Babe, that's huge, the Kyoto account. I felt a cold smile, tugging at the corner of my mouth. The Kyoto account, I repeated. That sounds fascinating. What kind of client is it? Tech, fashion. Rachel waved a hand dismissively. Oh, you wouldn't know them. It's high-end tech robotics, multi-billion-dollar stuff. Confidential, obviously. Obviously, I said. It's just strange. What is? Rachel snapped. Well, I said, pulling my phone out and looking at it casually. I follow the industry pretty closely, and I know for a fact that Helix Media doesn't have a Kyoto account. Their Asian operations are exclusively based in Tokyo and Seoul. They closed the Kyoto satellite office 4 years ago before the restructuring. The silence that followed was sharp. Rachel blinked, her mouth opening and closing slightly. What would you know about it? She spat, her face flushing pink. You read that on some blog? I'm on the inside, Vanessa. I know what's happening in the boardroom. And the CEO, I pressed, ignoring her insult. You said you met her on Tuesday, in her office. Yes, Rachel shouted, her composure cracking. Why are you grilling me? Are you that jealous? It's just that on Tuesday, I said, scrolling through my phone. The trade news reported the CEO of Helix was in New York finalizing the acquisition of Redpoint Analytics. There are photos of her ringing the closing bell. So I'm confused how she was having a heart-to-heart with you in her office at the same time. I looked up, locking eyes with her. Unless she has a clone. Rachel scrambled. She stood up, nearly knocking over her champagne glass. You don't know what you're talking about. She flew back. She took a private jet just to meet with the senior team. For a lunch with a junior hire, I asked softly. I am not a junior hire, Rachel screamed. The veneer of the sophisticated career woman dissolved instantly, revealing the petulant bully beneath. Jard, are you going to let her speak to me like this? She's calling me a liar in my own house. Jard jumped off the arm of the sofa, his face red with embarrassment and anger. But the anger wasn't directed at the woman screaming lies, it was directed at me. Vanessa, enough, Jard barked, stepping between me and Rachel. What is wrong with you? You come into my house, looking like trash, give me a cheap gift, and now you're trying to humiliate my girlfriend? Because what? You're jealous she has a real job. I'm not jealous, Jard, I said, my voice steady, though it hurt to see him defend her so blindly. I'm trying to warn you. She's lying. She's lying about her job, she's lying about her position, and she's lying about who she is. Stop it, Dad stood up now, his heavy footsteps echoing on the hardwood. He loomed over me, his face twisted in disappointment. I knew I shouldn't have invited you. You always do this. You can't stand to see anyone else succeed. Rachel has been nothing but gracious to you, and you attack her. She called me a beggar, Dad, I said, gesturing to my clothes. She tried to send me to the service entrance. That's gracious. She was joking, Dad yelled. It was a joke. God, you're so sensitive. No wonder you can't keep a man. No wonder you're stuck in whatever dead-end life you're living. He's right, Rachel chimed in from behind Jard, peeking out with a smug, teary-eyed expression. She wiped a fake tear from her cheek. I tried to be nice, Jard, I tried, but she's just toxic. She's toxic energy. I don't want her here. You heard her, Jard said, pointing to the door. Get out, Ness, seriously, leave. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was the email reply from Marcus. Vanessa, are you serious? Rachel Miller started Monday. She's in entry-level sales. She's on a 90-day probation. I have her timesheet here. She clocked out early twice this week. Also, she's not authorized to speak on behalf of the company. What is she saying? Should I call security? I looked at the text. Then I looked at my brother, who was pointing at the door. I looked at my father, who was shaking his head in disgust. I'll leave, I said, holding up a hand. But before I go, I think there's one phone call we need to make. No more calls, Jared snapped. Just go. Rachel, I said, raising my voice to cut through the noise. I looked directly at her. If you're best friends with the CEO, why don't you call her right now? Put her on speaker. Let's clear this up. Rachel froze. Her eyes darted around the room. The guests were watching now, sensing the blood in the water. I can't, she stammered. It's the weekend, she's busy. I respect her boundaries. That's funny, I said, taking a step forward. Because you said she took a shine to you, surely she'd take a call from her protégé. She's bluffing, Jared, Rachel shrieked, clutching his arm. Make her leave, she's crazy. I'm not bluffing, I said. In fact, I have the Helix corporate directory right here. I turned the screen of my phone around so the room could see. This is the live org chart. I tapped the screen. Here is the executive board. Here are the VPs. Here are the senior managers. I scrolled down, past names and faces. And all the way down here, in the probationary pool, is Rachel Miller. The room went silent. I saw a few guests leaning in to squint at the screen. That's an old list, Rachel yelled, her face turning a blotchy red. The system hasn't updated yet. I was promoted yesterday. Verbal promotion. A verbal promotion to the executive board in 3 days? I asked. Rachel, that's not how corporations work. That's not how my company works. Your company, Dad laughed, a harsh, barking sound. Vanessa, have you lost your mind? Now you're claiming you work there too? As what? The janitor Rachel joked about. No, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. I don't just work there. I looked at Rachel. She had gone pale. She was staring at me, really staring at me for the first time. She was looking at the way I held myself. She was looking at the phone in my hand, the phone that was logged into the admin account. You bragged about your career, I said to her. You bragged about the exclusive culture. You bragged about the CEO hating incompetence. I took a step closer to her. Jared tried to block me, but he faltered, confused by the shift in the atmosphere. You forgot one thing, Rachel, I said. You never checked to see who founded Helix Media. It's a holding company, Rachel stammered, her voice trembling. It's owned by a group. It's owned by VM Holdings, I corrected her. VM Vanessa Marie. That's my middle name, Rachel. I saw the realization hit her like a physical blow. Her knees actually buckled slightly. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. You drive a Honda, you look like this. I drive a Honda because I put my money into my employees, I said. I look like this because I just spent 3 days closing the Red Point merger that you read about in the news. The merger I signed. Bullshit, Jared whispered. He looked from me to Rachel. Ness, stop lying. Dad, tell her to stop. She's lying, Rachel screamed, but the desperation in her voice betrayed her. She lunged for my phone. Give me that. You faked that app. You faked it. I pulled the phone back easily. I didn't fake this. I pressed the button on the screen. Calling, Marcus Thorne, VP of Sales. I put it on speaker. The phone rang once, twice. The sound echoed in the silent, tension-filled room. Vanessa, Marcus's voice boomed from the speaker, clear and authoritative. I got your email. I'm looking at Miller's file right now. Why is she claiming to be an exec? Do you want me to terminate her access immediately? Because if she's misrepresenting the company at a public event, that's a violation of Clause 4 in her contract. Rachel let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Jared's jaw dropped. Dad's Scotch glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The silence that followed Marcus's voice on the speakerphone was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. The only sound was the jagged crunch of glass under my father's shoe as he shifted his weight, staring at the phone in my hand as if it were a grenade that had just detonated. "Vanessa," Marcus said again, his voice tinny but unmistakably serious. "I need a verbal confirmation. Is Miller causing a scene? Security can be there in 20 minutes if you're at the residence." I didn't look at the phone. I kept my eyes locked on Rachel. Her face was a mask of crumbling plaster. The arrogance, the sneer, the pity, it was all gone, replaced by a raw, naked terror. "No, Marcus," I said calmly, my voice projecting clearly to the back of the room where the neighbors were whispering. "Security won't be necessary. Rachel was just explaining to everyone how she practically runs the place. I think she's finished her presentation now. Haven't you, Rachel?" Rachel made a small, choking sound. "Jard," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand toward my brother. Jard recoiled. He actually took a physical step back, his eyes wide and horrified. He looked from her to me, the pieces of the puzzle finally slamming into place. The struggling sister, the rich girlfriend, the lies, the reality. You lied," Jard said, his voice cracking. "You said you were an executive. You said you were making 6 figures." I was going to," Rachel stammered, tears now streaming down her face, ruining her contour. "I have potential, Jard. It was just a little white lie to impress your dad. Everyone does it." "You tried to get my sister fired," Jard said, the anger finally bubbling up through his confusion. "You stood there and joked about making her a janitor at her own company." "I didn't know," Rachel shrieked, turning on me. "How was I supposed to know? You look like a bum, you drive a piece of junk, you tricked me, you set me up." I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I didn't trick you, Rachel, I just existed. You filled in the blanks with your own prejudice. You saw a Honda and assumed failure. You saw a hoodie and assumed poverty. That's not on me, that's on you. And frankly, it's exactly why you're not a cultural fit for Helix." I lifted the phone to my mouth again. "Marcus." "I'm here, boss." "Terminate Rachel Miller's contract immediately," I said. "Effective now. Mark it as gross misconduct and misrepresentation of company authority." "And Marcus." "Yes." "Make sure legal sends a cease and desist regarding her use of our trade name. If I hear she's used the Helix brand to leverage so much as a free appetizer at a restaurant, I want her sued into the ground." "Understood," Marcus said. "It's done. Her access is revoked. Her badge won't work on Monday." "No," Rachel screamed. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You can't do this. You can't fire me on a Saturday. This is illegal. I'll sue you. My dad knows lawyers." I pulled my arm away, dusting off the sleeve of my hoodie where she had touched me. "You're on probation, Rachel. I can fire you for wearing the wrong color socks. But firing you for publicly humiliating the CEO and lying about corporate strategy? That's a slam dunk. Save your dad's money. You're going to need it for rent." Rachel looked around the room, desperate for an ally. She looked at her friends, but they were all studying the floor or their drinks, distancing themselves from the blast radius. She looked at Dad. "Thomas," she pleaded, "you know me, you know I'm a good person, tell her to stop, she's ruinin'." "Gee, your party." My father, Thomas, looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He looked at the woman he had dismissed for 30 years, the daughter he had called a failure an hour ago, and he realized he was looking at the most powerful person in the room. "Rachel," Dad said, his voice hoarse, I think you should go." Rachel gasped, "What but, Jard?" Jard didn't look at her. He walked over to the front door and opened it wide. The evening air drifted in, cool and crisp. "Get out," Jard said softly. "But my ride," Rachel sobbed. "I rode with you." "Call an Uber," Jard said. "Just get out of my house." Rachel stood there for a moment, shaking with rage and humiliation. Then she let out a scream of frustration, grabbed her purse from the sofa, and stormed toward the door. As she passed me, she hissed, "You're a witch. You'll die alone with your money." "Better than dying a fraud," I replied calmly. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't tense, it was stunned. The guests were motionless. The music had stopped at some point. I looked at the room of people, the neighbors who had laughed at me, the important friends from the club. "Well," I said, tucking my phone back into my pocket, "I think that concludes the entertainment for the evening. Happy housewarming, Jard. Enjoy the knives. They really are excellent for cutting through the bullshit." I turned to leave. "Vanessa, wait," Dad said. I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "What is it, Dad? Did I make it awkward again?" "Please," Dad said, "don't go, just come sit down." I turned slowly. My father looked 10 years older than he had when I arrived. He was slumped in his armchair, the spilled scotch soaking into the rug by his feet. Jard was leaning against the doorframe, his head in his hands. The guests, sensing the intimacy of the family implosion, began to make their excuses. "I think we should get going," Aunt Marge mumbled, scurrying toward the door with her husband in tow. "Lovely party, Jard," someone else lied. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty, save for the three of us. The silence of the large, empty house was oppressive. I walked over to the kitchen island and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were finally steady. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a profound sadness. "How long?" Jard asked, lifting his head. His eyes were red. "How long have you owned it?" "I founded it 10 years ago," I said, leaning against the counter. "Helix Media. It started in that basement apartment you guys made fun of." "But VM Holdings?" Dad asked, looking at me with a bewildered expression. "I saw that in the papers. They bought that analytics firm for $40 million. $65 million, I corrected him gently. "And yes, that's me." Dad let out a long breath, running a hand through his silver hair. Why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were struggling?" "I didn't let you think anything," I said, my voice rising slightly. "I told you I was working in marketing. I told you business was good. You never asked for details. You never asked the name of the company. You assumed. You assumed that because I didn't drive a Mercedes, I wasn't successful. You assumed that because I didn't ask you for money, I must be scraping by." "We just wanted to help," Dad said weakly. "No, you didn't," I snapped. "You wanted to feel superior. You wanted to be the savior for Jard, and you wanted me to be the cautionary tale. Don't end up like Vanessa, working too hard for too little." It made you feel better about spoiling him. Jard flinched. "Ness, that's not fair." "Isn't it?" I asked him. "Jard, you're 28. Dad negotiated your down payment. Mom buys your groceries half the time. And today, you let a woman you've known for 3 weeks treat your sister like a dog because you thought she had more status than me." Jard looked down at his shoes. I didn't know she was lying. "It wouldn't have mattered if she was telling the truth," I shouted, slamming my hand on the counter. The noise made them both jump. "That's the point. Even if she was an executive and I was a janitor, you shouldn't have let her speak to me that way. You shouldn't have let her shame me for being poor. You're my brother." Tears pricked my eyes, hot and angry. "I didn't keep it a secret to trick you. I kept it a secret because I wanted to know if you loved me or if you only loved success. And tonight, I got my answer." "Vanessa," Dad said, standing up shakily. He walked over to me, reaching out a hand. I am so proud of you. 65 million, my God, you're a CEO, a titan of industry." I looked at his hand. I looked at the gleam in his eye, the same gleam Rachel had when she talked about the Kyoto account. He wasn't seeing his daughter. He was seeing the net worth. He was seeing the bragging rights at the country club. My daughter, the CEO. I stepped back, out of his reach. "Don't," I said coldly. "Don't try to claim this now. You didn't build this. You didn't support this. You laughed at the hoodie that I wore because I was too busy building an empire to shop." "I'm your father," he said, hurt flashing across his face. "Doesn't that count for something?" "It counts for everything," I said. "It means you should have defended me when I had nothing. It's easy to love the winner, Dad. It's a lot harder to love the struggling artist." You failed the test. I grabbed my purse. I felt lighter than I had in years. The secret was out, the burden was gone, and the ties that bound me to their approval had been severed. Jard, I said, pausing at the door. The knives really are nice. Keep them. Cook something for yourself for once. Ness, Jard called out, his voice cracking. Are we okay? I looked at him. He looked like a little boy lost in a big house he couldn't afford. I don't know, I said honestly. I think I need some space, a lot of space. Don't call me for a while, I have a company to run. I walked out the front door, past the spot where Rachel had stood, past the line of luxury cars. I got into my 2014 Honda Civic. I turned the key, and the engine rattled to life. It wasn't a pretty sound, but it was mine. As I drove away, leaving the McMansion in the rearview mirror, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my real estate agent. Subject: the penthouse listing Vanessa, the owner of the building next to yours, is looking to sell the top 2 floors. Private elevator, helipad access. Interested? I smiled, the first genuine smile I had felt in a long time. Reply: let's view it Monday, and tell them I'm paying cash. I rolled down the window, letting the cool night air rush in. I wasn't just Vanessa the sister or Vanessa the failure anymore. I was Vanessa, the CEO. And for the first time, I didn't care who knew it.